A neglected dog keeps following a vet for help, and when he realizes why, he can't hold back tears. At first it looks like just another stray, limping and scarred, but this dog refuses to leave his side. No matter where the vet goes, it follows. Then comes the chilling discovery. A hidden past, darker than anyone could imagine. Powerful men want this dog gone forever, and the deeper the vet digs, the more dangerous it becomes. For both of them, a desperate fight for survival. A bond no cruelty could break, and a secret so painful it will change everything. Why did this broken animal choose him, and what truth will bring the vet to his knees? Your presence here is powerful. In a world full of noise, it's the quiet gestures of compassion that truly stand out. If your heart still makes room for kindness, you're already one of us. The autumn wind whistled through the empty streets as Dr. Leonard Briggs locked up his veterinary clinic for the night. The metal sign reading Briggs Veterinary Services creaked softly above the door, its paint peeling at the edges from years of sun and rain. He pulled his worn leather jacket tighter around his shoulders, his breath visible in the chilly evening air. 20 years of treating injured and abandoned animals had left their mark on Leonard. His salt and pepper hair caught the dim glow of the streetlights, and deep lines etched his weathered face. He'd seen too much suffering, too many cases of neglect that had slowly built walls around his heart. The click of his boots against the sidewalk echoed in the quiet night. That's when he first heard it, the soft scrape of paws following behind him. Leonard stopped and turned around slowly. In the shadows between two buildings, a pair of eyes reflected the streetlight's glow. "Go on now," he said gruffly, waving his hand. "Clinic's closed." The dog limped forward into the light. Leonard's trained eye immediately catalogued its condition. Severely undernourished, matted fur, favoring its right front leg. But what caught his attention most were the dog's eyes, deep brown and filled with an almost human-like intelligence and desperation. Leonard shook his head and started walking again. The clicking of claws on concrete followed him. He stopped. The dog stopped. He walked. It walked. This continued for 3 blocks until Leonard finally turned around with an exasperated sigh. "Listen here," he said, pointing a finger at the dog. "I've spent all day dealing with other people's animals. I don't need another one following me home." The dog sat down, tilting its head slightly. Its tail made a weak attempt at wagging, stirring up small clouds of dust from the sidewalk. Despite its pitiful state, there was something dignified about the way it held itself. Leonard pulled out his phone and shined the light on the dog, getting a better look. It was a large mixed breed, probably part German shepherd, with patches of fur missing and what looked like old scars across its shoulders. No collar. The dog didn't flinch from the light or show any aggression. It just watched Leonard with that same pleading persistence. "Fine," Leonard muttered, continuing his walk home. "But don't expect anything from me." The dog followed him all the way to his small craftsman house at the edge of town. Leonard walked up the porch steps, unlocked his door, and went inside without looking back. Through his living room window, he watched the dog settle down near his porch steps, curling up into a tight ball. Leonard heated up leftover soup for dinner, trying to ignore the occasional whimper from outside. The temperature was dropping quickly. He could see frost starting to form on his windows. He put his bowl in the sink and glanced outside again. The dog hadn't moved, though he could see it shivering. Mrs. Peterson from next door came out with a bowl of what looked like leftover pot roast. Leonard watched through the window as she approached the dog carefully, speaking in soft tones. The dog lifted its head but wouldn't take the food. After several minutes, Mrs. Peterson left the bowl and went back inside. The food remained untouched. An hour later, Leonard checked again. The bowl was still full, and the dog was still shivering. He grabbed an old blanket from his closet and opened his front door. "This doesn't mean anything," he said firmly, tossing the blanket near the dog. "And don't get comfortable. Tomorrow you're going to the shelter." The dog looked up at him, those brown eyes seeming to see right through his gruff exterior. It made no move toward the blanket, just kept watching him with that strange, steady gaze. Leonard stood in his doorway, feeling the cold air seep into his bones. 20 years of practice had taught him to maintain professional distance, to not get emotionally involved. He'd seen too many hearts broken over animals that couldn't be saved, too many tears shed over pets that had been abandoned or abused. But something about this dog's quiet persistence got under his skin. It wasn't acting like a typical stray. It wasn't scared or aggressive, wasn't scrounging for food. It was almost as if it had chosen him specifically for some reason he couldn't understand. "Stubborn thing, aren't you?" he muttered. The dog's tail thumped once against the wooden porch. Leonard sighed heavily, his breath forming a cloud in the cold air. He told himself he was just doing his job, just being a veterinarian. Nothing more. "Come on, then," he said, holding the door open wider. "At least for tonight, but don't make yourself at home." The dog stood slowly, favoring its injured leg, and limped past him into the house. It didn't bound in excitedly or sniff around like most dogs would. Instead, it found a spot near the radiator and settled down carefully, those intelligent eyes never leaving Leonard's face. Leonard closed the door against the night air, already questioning his decision. "Don't look at me like that," he told the dog. "This is temporary, very temporary." But even as he said the words, something in his chest shifted slightly, like an old door creaking open after years of being locked. He pushed the feeling away and headed to bed, leaving the dog by the radiator. Yet he couldn't shake the sense that something significant had just happened, that this wasn't just another stray finding shelter for the night. The next morning, Leonard woke up earlier than usual. The dog was still there, curled up exactly where he'd left it by the radiator. As he moved around getting ready, those watchful eyes followed his every movement. "Might as well do this properly," Leonard muttered, grabbing his coat. "Come on, let's get you checked out." The walk to his clinic took longer than usual with the dog's limp. The morning air was crisp, and frost crunched under their feet. Main Street was quiet, with only a few early risers heading to Pete's Diner for coffee. At the clinic, Leonard flipped on the lights and led the dog to his examination room. The familiar smell of antiseptic and the sound of humming fluorescent lights filled the space. Sarah, his receptionist, wouldn't be in for another hour, giving him time to work in peace. "Up you go," he said, patting the examination table. The dog complied without hesitation, showing none of the usual nervous behavior most strays exhibited in clinical settings. Leonard found this oddly unsettling. He began his examination, speaking softly as he worked. "Let's see what we've got here." His practiced hands moved gently over matted fur, finding old scars and fresh wounds. The leg injury wasn't as severe as he'd feared, mostly deep bruising and strain, no breaks. "You've been through something, haven't you?" Leonard cleaned several cuts with antiseptic, noting how the dog barely flinched. As he worked his way down the dog's back, his hand passed over something familiar, the slight bump of a microchip. Leonard reached for his scanner, running it over the area. The device beeped, displaying a sequence of numbers. He walked over to his computer and typed them in, expecting to find a straightforward registration. His frown deepened as he read the screen. "That can't be right," he muttered. The registration was under the name John Smith, obviously fake, but the address was what caught his attention. It matched a property owned by Henry Callaway, the wealthy developer who'd been buying up failing farms around town for years. Leonard had treated some of Callaway's horses in the past, and had always felt something was off about the man. There had been rumors about his treatment of animals, but nothing concrete enough to investigate. The dog watched him intently as these thoughts crossed his mind. Its gaze seemed almost knowing, making Leonard increasingly uncomfortable. He'd worked with thousands of animals over his career, but something about this one was different. It wasn't just seeking food or shelter, it seemed to want something specific from him. "What's your story?" Leonard asked quietly, running his hand over the dog's head. "Why were you registered under a false name? And why did you pick me to follow?" The dog pressed its head into Leonard's hand, those brown eyes never leaving his face. The gesture was so deliberate, it made Leonard step back slightly. He checked the rest of the registration details. The chip had been implanted 3 years ago, but there were no vet records attached, unusual for an animal owned by someone as wealthy as Callaway. The breed was listed simply as mixed, though Leonard could see clear signs of careful breeding in the dog's bone structure. Sarah's voice from the front office startled him. "Dr. Briggs, you're in early. Back here," he called, quickly closing the registration window. Something told him to keep this information to himself for now. Sarah appeared in the doorway, her eyes lighting up at the sight of the dog. "Oh, who's this?" "Just a stray that followed me home," Leonard said, trying to sound casual. "Thought I'd check him over before taking him to the shelter." The dog's head snapped toward him at the word shelter, and a low whine escaped its throat. The sound was so human-like in its distress that both Leonard and Sarah stared. "Well," Sarah said after a moment, "he seems quite attached to you already. Maybe you could—" "No," Leonard cut her off firmly. "You know I don't keep pets. Too busy." But even as he said it, he felt a nagging sense of responsibility. This wasn't just about giving a stray a home anymore. There was something deeper going on, something potentially troubling. The dog had settled back down, but its eyes remained fixed on Leonard with that same unsettling intensity. Whatever its connection to Henry Callaway, whatever had happened to it, the animal had deliberately sought him out. Leonard finished applying antibiotic ointment to the last of the wounds, his mind racing. He needed to figure out what was going on, but he had to be careful. Callaway was powerful in their small town, with connections reaching into local government and law enforcement. "Sarah," he called out to his receptionist, who was now at her desk. "Hold off on calling the shelter for now. I'll keep him at my place while we try to sort this out." The dog's tail thumped against the examination table, and for a moment Leonard could have sworn he saw relief in those intelligent eyes. The morning sun streamed through the clinic's windows as Leonard reviewed patient files at the front desk. The mysterious dog lay quietly beside him, still refusing to leave his side. 3 days had passed since he'd discovered the microchip, and Leonard still wasn't sure what to make of the situation. The clinic's door burst open with such force that the bell nearly flew off its hook. Henry Callaway strode in, his expensive suit out of place among the worn waiting room chairs. His face was red with anger. "Where is my dog?" Callaway demanded, his voice echoing through the small space. "I know you have him." The dog pressed against Leonard's leg, trembling. Leonard stood slowly, positioning himself between the animal and Callaway. "Mr. Callaway, this dog came to me severely injured. As a veterinarian, I have a duty of care. That's my property." Callaway cut him off, jabbing a finger toward the dog. "I've got the registration right here." He slapped a paper onto the counter. Clara Yates emerged from the back room, her auburn hair falling loose from its usual neat bun. She crossed her arms and planted herself beside Leonard. "Registration under a false name, you mean?" she challenged. Callaway's eyes narrowed. "Watch yourself, young lady. This doesn't concern you." "Actually, it does," Clara replied. "I'm Dr. Briggs's veterinary technician, and I've documented all this dog's injuries. Would you care to explain how he got them?" Leonard shot Clara a warning look, but admired her courage. He turned back to Callaway. "The dog needs medical attention once he's properly healed." "Let me make something very clear," Callaway interrupted, leaning over the counter. His voice dropped to a menacing whisper. I'm on the State Veterinary Board's advisory committee. One phone call from me about questionable practices at your clinic. He let the threat hang in the air. Leonard felt his jaw tighten. He'd worked 20 years building his practice, gaining the community's trust. Everything he had could be destroyed by this man's influence. You can't intimidate us, Clara declared, though Leonard noticed her hands trembling slightly. If you want this dog back, you'll need to explain these injuries to animal control. Callaway's laugh was cold. Animal control? You mean Jim Davis? Had dinner with him last week. Lovely wife he has, about to make detective. He straightened his tie. Face it, Briggs, you're out of your depth here. Give me my dog, or I'll make sure you never practice veterinary medicine again. The dog whimpered, pressing harder against Leonard's leg. Leonard looked down at those intelligent eyes, remembering how the animal had sought him out specifically. Whatever was happening here went deeper than a simple ownership dispute. Mr. Callaway, Leonard said carefully, I have a legal and ethical obligation to ensure this animal's welfare. I can't release him until I'm satisfied he'll receive proper care. Legal obligation! Callaway sneered. I know people in every courthouse in this county. By the time I'm done, you'll be lucky to find work at a petting zoo. He pulled out his phone. One call, Briggs. That's all it takes. Clara stepped forward. Make your call. While you're at it, I'll call the press. I'm sure they'd love to hear about one of our town's most prominent citizens using his influence to bully a veterinarian who's just trying to help an injured animal. Leonard felt a surge of gratitude toward Clara, even as worry gnawed at his stomach. She was right. They couldn't back down, but the consequences could be severe. Callaway's face darkened. You think you're clever, don't you? Both of you. He pocketed his phone and grabbed the registration paper from the counter. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. He turned toward the door, then looked back with a cold smile. Enjoy your careers while they last. The bell jangled violently as he slammed the door behind him. Through the window, they watched him climb into his luxury car and speed away, gravel spraying from his tires. Clara let out a shaky breath. We did the right thing. Right? Leonard ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of Callaway's threats. I don't know, Clara. He has the power to make good on those threats. He looked down at the dog, who had stopped trembling and now stood alert, watching them both. But something's very wrong here. Why would a man like Callaway register a dog under a false name? Why these injuries? Which is exactly why we can't give him back. Clara insisted. Leonard, I know you're worried about the clinic, but this is bigger than that. That man is hiding something, and this dog... She knelt down beside the animal. He came to you for a reason. Leonard nodded slowly, his mind racing with possibilities and consequences. Everything he'd worked for was at risk, but the alternative, sending this dog back to whatever had caused those injuries, was unthinkable. The dog moved between them, touching his nose to their hands in turn, as if acknowledging their protection. Leonard felt his resolve strengthen, despite his fears. Whatever Callaway was involved in, whatever price he might have to pay, he knew Clara was right. They had to stand firm. Leonard spread the vaccination records across his desk, while Clara pulled up their digital database on the computer. The evening sun cast long shadows through the clinic windows as they worked, with Brutus sleeping peacefully in the corner. Look at this, Clara said, tapping her screen. Over the past 2 years, Callaway has registered 6 different dogs, all under slightly different names: Henry C. Wallace, Henrik Callaway, Henry C. Walsh. She shook her head. How did we miss this before? Leonard leaned over her shoulder, studying the entries. Because we never had reason to check. Each registration came through different staff members, different times of year. He picked up a paper file. But the addresses, they're all variations of his property listings. Clara typed rapidly, cross-referencing the data. The vaccination schedules are weird too. Most people bring their dogs in regularly, but these... She pointed to several gaps in the records. These dogs show up once for initial shots, then disappear. No follow-ups, no routine care. Could be negligence, Leonard suggested, but his gut told him otherwise. He looked over at Brutus, who had woken up and was watching them intently. The dog's scars seemed more prominent in the fading light. "Those aren't normal fighting wounds," Clara said softly, following his gaze. "I've seen dogs that got into scraps. This is different. These injuries are..." She swallowed hard. "They're systematic." Leonard walked over to Brutus, kneeling beside him. The dog immediately pressed against his leg, a gesture that had become familiar over the past few days. "You've seen this before, haven't you, boy?" "Other dogs, other fights." Brutus whined softly, his eyes never leaving Leonard's face. "Wait," Clara called out suddenly. "I found something." She waved Leonard back to the computer. "Remember that weird registration code on Brutus's microchip? I ran it against our other records. Look." Leonard squinted at the screen. Among the standard registration numbers was a pattern. Certain dogs had additional digits that didn't match the usual format. Could be a tracking system, Clara suggested. A way to identify dogs without using their real records. Leonard felt his stomach tighten. "Pull up satellite images of Callaway's property," he said. "The main estate, not the development sites." Clara opened a mapping program. The sprawling estate appeared, with its manicured lawns and long driveway. But behind the main house, partially hidden by trees, several outbuildings formed a cluster. "Those weren't there 5 years ago," Leonard said, pointing to 3 identical structures. "I remember treating one of his horses. There was just an old barn back then." Clara zoomed in as far as the image allowed. "They're like small arenas," she said, "but there's no fencing for livestock. And look, they're completely enclosed. No windows." Leonard straightened up, running a hand through his hair. The pieces were fitting together, forming a picture he didn't want to see but couldn't ignore. "A fighting ring," he said quietly. "Hidden enough that neighbors wouldn't hear. Climate-controlled buildings where he could stage matches year-round. That's why the dogs disappear from our records," Clara added, her voice shaking slightly. "They either win and keep fighting or..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Brutus had padded over to them, his tail low but wagging slightly. Leonard remembered how the dog had sought him out specifically, following him home that first night. "You recognized me," he said, realization dawning. "From your puppy vaccinations, before they took you to that place." Clara began printing documents, her movements quick and purposeful. "We have to report this. With these records, the irregular registrations, Brutus's injuries, it's enough to warrant an investigation. Callaway has connections everywhere," Leonard reminded her. "Police, animal control, the veterinary board. You heard him yourself." "Then we go higher," Clara insisted. "State authorities. Federal level if we have to. Dogfighting rings cross state lines. That makes it federal jurisdiction." She gathered the printed papers into a folder. "We can't let him keep doing this, Leonard. How many more dogs are in those buildings right now?" Leonard looked at Brutus, who met his gaze steadily. The dog had escaped, had somehow found the one person who might remember him from before, who might help. It wasn't just about one dog anymore, it was about all of them. "Make copies of everything," Leonard said finally. "Every record, every registration, every scan of Brutus's injuries. We need multiple sets in different locations." He picked up his phone. "I know someone at the state attorney's office. It's time to make a call." Clara nodded, relief visible on her face. "What about Brutus?" "He stays with me," Leonard said firmly. He's our key witness, and more importantly. He scratched behind the dog's ears, earning a gentle tail wag. He trusted us to help. I won't let him down. As Clara began copying files, Leonard stared out the window at the darkening sky. They were taking on a powerful man, risking their livelihoods and possibly more. But looking at Brutus's scarred face, remembering all the dogs that had disappeared from their records, he knew they had no choice. Sometimes doing the right thing meant facing your fears head-on. The first brick came through the clinic window at 2:15 in the morning. Leonard jolted awake at the sound of shattering glass, his heart pounding. He'd been sleeping on the cot in his office, unwilling to leave Brutus alone in the kennels overnight. More crashes followed. Leonard fumbled for his phone, dialing 911 as he ran to check on Brutus. The dog was already alert, hackles raised but eerily quiet. Through the kennel window, shadows moved in the parking lot. Someone's breaking into Valley View Veterinary Clinic. Leonard whispered into the phone. 3 men, maybe 4. A figure appeared at the kennel door, working at the lock with something metal. Brutus growled low in his throat. Leonard grabbed the first weapon he could find, a heavy metal feeding bowl. The door burst open. 2 men in dark clothes rushed in, heading straight for Brutus's cage. Leonard swung the bowl, catching the first intruder in the shoulder. The man stumbled backward with a curse. "Get the dog!" the second man shouted. "Boss wants it gone." Brutus exploded into action. Despite his healing injuries, he slammed against his cage door with such force that the latch rattled. The men hesitated just long enough for distant sirens to pierce the night. "Forget it." The first man grabbed his partner's arm. They fled, leaving scattered tools behind. The police arrived minutes later, but Leonard knew they wouldn't find anything. The intruders had been professionals, wearing gloves and masks. The only evidence was broken glass and a message spray-painted across the clinic wall. "Back off. You should file a report," Officer Martinez said, but her tone suggested she knew it wouldn't help. Everyone in town knew Callaway's reach. Leonard spent the rest of the night cleaning up glass, Brutus watching from his kennel with worried eyes. By morning, Leonard had replaced the broken window with plywood and was running on nothing but coffee and determination. "You're not going home?" Clara asked when she arrived for work. "Got a farm call out at the Weber place," Leonard said, checking his medical bag. "Their prize mare is due to foal any day." "After what happened last night?" "Leonard, you need rest." He shook his head. "Can't let Callaway think he's winning." He glanced at Brutus, who hadn't slept either. "Coming along, boy." The dog's tail wagged once, decisive. The morning air was crisp as they drove out of town in Leonard's old truck. Brutus sat in the passenger seat, nose twitching at the farm scents drifting through the cracked window. For a moment, everything felt almost normal. Then Leonard noticed the black SUV in his rearview mirror. It had been following them since they left the main road, keeping just far enough back to seem casual. Leonard's hands tightened on the steering wheel. The dirt road ahead wound through dense woodland before reaching the Weber farm. Perfect place for an ambush. He was right. Halfway through the woods, a second SUV appeared ahead, blocking the narrow road. Leonard hit the brakes as the vehicle behind them accelerated, boxing them in. 3 men emerged from the front SUV. Leonard recognized one as the guy who'd threatened him at the clinic. They carried baseball bats. "Dr. Briggs," the leader called out, tapping his bat against his palm. "Mr. Callaway says you're not being reasonable. We're here to help change your mind." Brutus's growl filled the truck cab. Leonard reached for his phone, but the signal was dead out here. Probably not a coincidence. "Last chance," the man said. "Walk away from this. Forget what you think you know." Leonard's mind raced. He could see more men emerging from the SUV behind them. 6 against 1. But if he gave in now, what happened to the next dog Callaway decided to use? The next person who stood up to him? No. Leonard said, loud enough to carry. "I won't walk away." The men advanced. Leonard opened his door, knowing running wasn't an option, but unwilling to be trapped in the truck. "Stay, Brutus," he commanded. Brutus ignored him completely. As the first man swung his bat, Brutus launched himself through the driver's side window. His powerful jaws clamped down on the attacker's arm, sending the bat flying. The man screamed. Leonard barely had time to register what was happening. Brutus moved like lightning, despite his limp, a fury of teeth and snarls that sent the men scrambling backward. Two more swung their bats, but Brutus was already between them and Leonard, his stance protective and his eyes fierce. "Call him off!" someone shouted. "Get the trank gun!" Another yelled. Leonard saw the glint of a needle. "Brutus, watch out!" The dog ducked as the dart whistled past. Then distant engine sounds made everyone freeze, a logging truck coming up the road. The would-be attackers exchanged glances. "This isn't over," the leader spat, clutching his bleeding arm. They piled back into their SUVs and reversed away, leaving Leonard and Brutus standing in the middle of the dirt road. When they were gone, Brutus turned to Leonard, whining softly. Blood matted the fur around his newly torn stitches, but his tail wagged as Leonard knelt to check him over. "You saved my life," Leonard whispered, his hands shaking as he examined the dog's wounds. "You didn't have to do that. You're already hurt." Brutus just pressed his head against Leonard's chest, as if to say it hadn't been a choice at all. Leonard sat at his desk late into the evening, surrounded by scattered papers and clinic records. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he barely noticed. Clara worked quietly beside him, cross-referencing vaccination records with the false registrations they'd discovered. "Here's another one," Clara said, pushing a file toward him. "Same pattern, registered under different owners, but all the blood work was processed through Callaway's account." Leonard rubbed his tired eyes. "How many does that make?" 23 dogs in the past 2 years. Clara's voice cracked. "All siblings from the same breeding program." Brutus lay under Leonard's desk, his head resting on Leonard's feet. The dog had refused to leave his side since the attack on the road 3 days ago. "Wait." Clara suddenly straightened, pulling out an old vaccination record. "Leonard, look at this, from 18 months ago." The paper trembled in Leonard's hands as he read. 2 puppies, same litter. Both registered to separate owners, but with identical genetic markers. One was Brutus, the other, Caesar. Leonard whispered. The memory hit him like a physical blow. He'd vaccinated both puppies himself, back when they were just weeks old. Identical markings, playing together in his exam room. "What happened to Caesar?" Clara asked softly. Leonard's fingers flew over his keyboard, pulling up cross-referenced records. His stomach turned as the truth emerged. Caesar's last recorded visit was 8 months ago, an emergency appointment with another vet in the next county. Cause of death, severe trauma. "He died in the ring," Leonard said, his voice hollow. "Callaway. He made them fight each other. Brothers." Brutus whined softly, pressing closer to Leonard's legs. Those haunted eyes suddenly made terrible sense. Clara's face had gone pale. "That's why Brutus came to you. He remembered you from when they were puppies. You were the last person who treated them both with kindness." Leonard pushed back from his desk, overwhelmed. He knelt beside Brutus, who looked up at him with such trust it made his chest ache. "You watched your brother die," he said quietly, "and then you ran. Found the only person you remembered being gentle to you both." Brutus pressed his head against Leonard's chest, just as he had after the road attack. Leonard wrapped his arms around the dog, no longer fighting the emotion tightening his throat. Clara wiped her eyes. "It's not just Brutus and Caesar. Look at these patterns. Callaway's breeding dogs specifically to fight their siblings. The psychological trauma makes the fights more violent, He's marketing it as a specialty attraction and charging more for it," Leonard added grimly. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. That's why he's so desperate to get Brutus back. He's living proof of the whole operation. But why did Brutus choose now to escape? Clara wondered. Leonard studied the dates again. The attack on the road. Brutus knew those men, didn't he? They were coming to take you back to the ring. He said to the dog, "That's why you fought so hard." Brutus's scarred face told its own story. How many times had he been forced to fight? How had he found the strength to keep his gentle nature, his capacity to trust? "We have enough evidence now," Clara said. "We can prove the pattern of false registrations, the connection between the siblings, the financial trails." "It won't be enough." Leonard stood, decision crystallizing. Callaway's got too much influence locally. We need irrefutable proof. Photos of the fighting ring itself. Leonard, no, it's too dangerous. Those men nearly killed you on the road, and Brutus saved my life. Leonard looked down at the dog who had chosen him, who had somehow known he would help. "I won't let him down, not like everyone else has." Clara was quiet for a long moment. Then she squared her shoulders. "We'll need a plan. And backup. First, we need to find out where Callaway's holding the fights. They must be somewhere on his property, but it's hundreds of acres." Brutus's ears had perked up. He padded to Leonard's desk and pawed at one of the maps they'd been studying. "He knows," Clara breathed. "Leonard, he can lead us there." Leonard met Brutus's steady gaze. The dog who had survived unimaginable cruelty, who had watched his own brother die in that ring, was offering to go back, to help stop it from happening to others. "Okay," Leonard said softly. "But we do this smart. No more rushing in unprepared." He grabbed a fresh piece of paper and began writing. "We'll need cameras, documentation, and most importantly, we need to make sure Callaway can't bury this evidence like he's buried everything else." Clara nodded, already pulling out her phone. "I know someone at the State Veterinary Board, and my cousin's a journalist in the city." As they began plotting, Brutus settled between them, his presence a reminder of everything at stake. Leonard felt the last of his professional detachment crumbling away. This wasn't just about doing his job anymore, it was about justice, for Brutus, for Caesar, for all the dogs who had suffered in silence. And for the first time in years, Leonard felt truly alive with purpose. Leonard's hands trembled as he photographed the angry scars crisscrossing Brutus's body. Each mark told a story of cruelty, a testament to battles the dog never should have faced. The morning light streaming through the clinic windows highlighted every ridge and pucker of damaged tissue. "Hold still, boy," Leonard murmured, adjusting the ruler beside a particularly deep scar for scale. Brutus remained perfectly still, as if understanding the importance of the documentation. His trust made Leonard's chest ache. Clara entered with a stack of folders, her auburn hair escaping its usual neat ponytail. "I've pulled every record we have of dogs registered to Callaway's various aliases," she said, spreading them across the examination table. "Look at this pattern. Young males, usually siblings, registered in pairs, then one disappears while the other shows up months later with severe injuries." Leonard lowered his camera, jaw tight. "How many?" 28 pairs over the past 3 years. That we know of." Clara's voice shook with barely contained anger. "I called some of the other clinics in the region. Same story, dogs registered under different names, but all tracing back to Callaway's property." Brutus padded over to nuzzle Clara's hand, making her smile despite the grim work. Leonard watched their interaction, remembering how the dog had initially shied away from everyone but him. Now Brutus seemed to understand they were both fighting for him. "I've been reaching out to families who adopted survivors," Leonard said, picking up a thick manila envelope. "The ones Callaway discarded when they were too injured to fight anymore. 3 have agreed to give statements about the condition of the dogs when they got them. That's brave of them, Clara said. Considering Callaway's influence, they're angry, and they should be. Leonard ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair. One family's dog still has nightmares, wakes up howling and shaking, just like Brutus did that first week. Clara gathered the scattered photos, organizing them methodically. My contact at the State Veterinary Board is building a case file, but she says we need ironclad proof of the actual fighting operation. Photos of the ring, documentation of betting, something that can't be explained away. What about Judge Martinez? Leonard asked. Any luck there? A determined smile crossed Clara's face. She's willing to authorize a raid if we can show her enough evidence. She's known about Callaway's shady dealings for years, but never had enough to act on. This could be our chance. Leonard nodded, hope and anxiety warring in his chest. They were close, closer than anyone had ever gotten to exposing Callaway's operation. But that also made them more vulnerable than ever. We need to move carefully, he said, checking that the clinic's security cameras were recording. After the break-in attempt, he'd upgraded the entire system. Callaway's getting desperate. Those men on the road weren't just trying to scare us anymore. I know. Clara's hand drifted to her pocket, where she now carried pepper spray. But we can't back down, not when we're this close. Brutus barked softly, drawing their attention. He stood by the wall map they'd been using to track Callaway's properties, nose pointing to a remote section. He keeps trying to show us something there, Clara said. That has to be where the fights happen. Leonard studied the location. It's perfect. Old barn complex, far from the main road, multiple access points for quick escapes. He grabbed his jacket. We need to scout it out, carefully. I'll call Detective Reynolds, Clara said, already dialing. He said to keep him updated on any developments. Leonard knelt beside Brutus, meeting those intelligent eyes. You've been so brave, he said softly. We're going to make this right, I promise. The dog pressed his forehead against Leonard's chest, their ritual of mutual comfort and trust. In that moment, Leonard felt the last walls around his heart crumble completely. This wasn't just about doing his job or even seeking justice. It was about honoring the unshakable faith of a creature who had every reason to give up on humans, but chose to trust instead. Clara ended her call and joined them, determination written across her features. Reynolds is on board. He's getting surveillance equipment from the state police. We do this by the book. No chances for Callaway to wriggle out on technicalities. Leonard stood, feeling the weight of their gathered evidence, of all the suffering it represented. But he also felt stronger than he had in years. No longer was he the detached professional, going through the motions. This was a fight worth having, a cause worth risking everything for. We'll need to move soon, he said, looking at their wall of evidence. Before Callaway realizes how much we've gathered. Clara squeezed his arm. We're ready, all of us. Brutus wagged his tail once, as if agreeing. Together, they began organizing their documentation, preparing for the battle ahead. The morning sun streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across their work. Shadows that seemed less dark now, touched by the light of hope and purpose. The call came just before midnight. Leonard fumbled for his phone, still half asleep. Clara's voice crackled through, tight with urgency. Smoke! There's smoke coming from Callaway's kennels. Lots of it. Leonard sat bolt upright, already reaching for his clothes. Call 911. I'm on my way. He rushed to his truck, Brutus leaping into the passenger seat without hesitation. The night air carried the acrid scent of burning wood, even before they turned onto the county road leading to Callaway's property. Orange flames lit up the sky like a hellish sunrise. When they arrived, Clara's blue sedan was already parked haphazardly near the entrance. She ran toward them, face streaked with soot. "The fire department's coming, but they're at least 15 minutes out. Leonard, there are dogs inside. I can hear them barking." The kennel building was engulfed, flames shooting through the roof. Heat blasted their faces even from 50 feet away. Black smoke poured from every opening, and the horrible sound of terrified dogs pierced the night. "This is no accident," Leonard growled, grabbing emergency supplies from his truck. "Callaway's destroying evidence." Without another word, he wrapped a wet bandana around his face and grabbed a flashlight. Clara did the same, adding thick work gloves to her outfit. "Stay here, Brutus," Leonard commanded, but the dog ignored him, pushing past toward the burning building. The same determination that had kept him alive in the fighting rings now drove him toward the flames. They found a side door that wasn't completely consumed yet. Leonard kicked it open, and thick smoke billowed out. The heat was overwhelming, but the desperate howls of trapped dogs drove them forward. "This way!" Clara shouted over the roar of flames, pointing her flashlight beam towards the first row of kennels. Dogs pressed against their cage doors, eyes wild with fear. Leonard worked frantically at the locks, while Clara guided the frightened animals toward the exit. Some bolted immediately, while others cowered, too terrified to move. The smoke grew thicker with each passing minute. A thunderous crack split the air as part of the roof began to cave. Leonard dove, shielding Clara as burning debris rained down. When he looked up, he saw Brutus had somehow gotten ahead of them, using his powerful jaws to drag entire cages towards the door. "Smart boy," Leonard coughed, following Brutus's lead. They formed a chain, Leonard breaking locks, Clara guiding dogs out, and Brutus moving the smaller portable cages. The heat was becoming unbearable, and Leonard's lungs burned with every breath. They had freed maybe 20 dogs when Clara stumbled, overcome by smoke. Leonard caught her before she fell. "Get out!" he shouted, pushing her toward the exit. "I'll get the rest." But Clara shook her head, steadying herself against a wall. "Not leaving. Without you. Or them." Another section of roof collapsed, sending sparks and burning timber everywhere. Through the chaos, Leonard caught glimpses of evidence they'd never be able to recover. Betting sheets, registration documents, all going up in flames. Callaway had planned this well. Brutus's bark suddenly turned to a whimper. Leonard turned to see the dog swaying, the smoke finally overwhelming his powerful body. Without hesitation, Leonard scooped him up, all 90 pounds of him, and staggered toward the exit. "Clara, now!" They burst out into the clean night air, just as fire trucks came screaming up the drive. Leonard laid Brutus gently on the grass, checking his breathing while Clara directed firefighters to the remaining dogs. "Come on, boy," Leonard whispered, giving Brutus rescue breaths the way he'd done countless times for other animals. "Don't you dare give up now." For a terrifying moment, Brutus lay still. Then his chest heaved, and he coughed violently, eyes fluttering open. Leonard sagged with relief, his own lungs screaming for oxygen. Paramedics descended on them with oxygen masks and stern words about smoke inhalation. Through the chaos, Leonard counted the rescued dogs, 32 in total. Not all of them, but more than he'd dared hope for. Clara appeared beside him, also wearing an oxygen mask. Her eyes were red and streaming, but fierce with triumph. She held up her phone, showing video she'd somehow managed to take during their initial arrival. "Got Callaway. On camera," she wheezed, driving away when we pulled up. Proof. It was deliberate. Leonard nodded, too exhausted to speak. Brutus pressed against his leg, still coughing but standing strong. Together, they watched the firefighters battle the blaze, knowing that while Callaway had destroyed some evidence, he'd also made a fatal mistake. No one could ignore this level of cruelty now. The rescued dogs huddled in groups around them, some being treated for burns and smoke inhalation. others simply shaking with fear. But they were alive, and that was what mattered. Leonard felt Brutus's wet nose press into his palm, a reminder that sometimes the greatest acts of courage come from those who have suffered the most. Through the thick smoke and dancing flames, Leonard stumbled toward the exit with Brutus's heavy body in his arms. His muscles screamed in protest, but he refused to let go. Each step was a battle against exhaustion and the searing pain in his lungs. Behind him, Clara helped guide the last of the rescued dogs toward safety. The cool night air hit them like a blessing as they finally burst through the doorway. Leonard's legs gave out, and he carefully lowered Brutus to the ground. The big dog's breathing was shallow and labored, his fur singed in places. The wail of approaching sirens cut through the crackling of flames, but before Leonard could feel relief, the sound of tires on gravel made him look up. 3 black SUVs pulled into the property, blocking the main entrance. Henry Callaway stepped out of the middle vehicle, his expensive suit reflecting the orange glow of the fire. 4 men flanked him, their intentions clear in their stance. "You've been quite the thorn in my side, Dr. Briggs," Callaway called out, pulling something from his jacket. The metallic glint of a pistol caught the firelight. "But this ends now." Leonard struggled to his feet, positioning himself between Callaway and Brutus. His voice was hoarse from smoke, but steady. "It's over, Callaway. The police are almost here." Exactly why this needs to finish quickly. Callaway raised the gun, aiming it at Brutus. "That dog is my property, and I'll dispose of it as I see fit." Something snapped inside Leonard. All the years of seeing broken animals, of maintaining professional distance, of swallowing his anger at human cruelty. It all crystallized into a single moment of pure clarity. Without conscious thought, he launched himself forward. Callaway's eyes widened in surprise as Leonard crashed into him. The gun went off, the shot going wide, but Leonard didn't stop. His hands found Callaway's wrist, twisting with strength he didn't know he possessed. The weapon clattered to the ground. Callaway's men moved to intervene, but a deep, threatening growl froze them in place. Brutus had somehow found his feet and now stood guard, his massive frame blocking their path to Leonard. Despite his injuries, the dog's stance promised violence to anyone who dared approach. Leonard and Callaway grappled in the dirt, rolling away from the gun. Leonard took a hard punch to the ribs, but barely felt it. His focus was singular. Keep Callaway down until help arrived. He pinned the larger man's arms, using his body weight to hold him in place. "You're finished," Leonard gasped out. "Those dogs you tried to burn alive?" "They're evidence now. Every scar, every broken bone, every trauma, they tell your story." Callaway bucked and thrashed, his fancy suit now covered in mud and ash. "You've got nothing. No documents, no proof." "We have everything." Clara's voice rang out. She held up her phone triumphantly. "Including video of you fleeing the scene of arson. And thanks to your little show just now, attempted murder too." Police cruisers finally broke through the blockade of SUVs, lights painting the scene in red and blue. Callaway's men immediately raised their hands, their loyalty evaporating at the sight of law enforcement. Officers poured out of vehicles, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Leonard rolled off Callaway just as 2 officers reached them. They roughly hauled the land developer to his feet, snapping handcuffs around his wrists. His carefully maintained facade crumbled as the reality of his situation sank in. "You can't do this to me," Callaway sputtered. "Do you know who I am? I own half this county. And now you own a cell," one officer replied, leading him away. Leonard sagged to his knees, the adrenaline fading. Brutus limped to his side, pressing against him in silent support. Clara joined them, holding an oxygen mask she'd gotten from one of the newly arrived paramedics. "Breathe," she instructed, fitting the mask over Leonard's face. Her own voice was still raspy from smoke. "The fire department is handling the building, and animal control is here for the dogs. We did it." Leonard nodded. too exhausted to speak. He wrapped one arm around Brutus, feeling the steady thump of the dog's heart against his side. They watched as Callaway was placed in a police car, his empire crumbling around him in the glow of the still-burning building. Paramedics swarmed the scene, treating smoke inhalation and minor burns. Animal control officers began documenting and treating the rescued dogs, taking photographs and collecting evidence. Through it all, Brutus refused to leave Leonard's side, standing guard even as his own injuries were tended to. In the chaos of emergency vehicles and flashing lights, Leonard felt a profound sense of closure. The neglected dog who had followed him home weeks ago had led him straight into the fight of his life. Together, they had exposed a cruel operation and saved countless other animals from suffering the same fate. As he scratched behind Brutus's ears, Leonard realized that sometimes the most unlikely partnerships could bring about the greatest change. The weeks following Callaway's arrest brought a gentle rhythm to Leonard's life. Each morning began with Brutus's medication and physical therapy, a routine that slowly transformed from medical necessity into moments of connection. The large dog's limp gradually improved, though some scars would always remain, both physical and emotional. Clara proved invaluable during the recovery process, arriving early to help with treatments and staying late to ensure both patient and doctor were managing well. Her quiet competence and unwavering support touched something in Leonard that he'd thought long dormant. "You know," Clara said one evening as they watched Brutus dozing in the clinic's recovery area, "he's looking stronger every day." Leonard nodded, noticing how the haunted look in Brutus's eyes had softened. "The adoption papers came through yesterday," he said softly. "He's officially mine now." Clara's hand found his, squeezing gently. "I think he was yours from the moment he followed you home." The simple touch sent warmth through Leonard's chest. He looked at Clara, really looked at her, and saw the same compassion that had drawn him to veterinary medicine all those years ago. Somewhere along the way, he'd lost that spark, buried it beneath layers of protective cynicism. "I used to think I was saving these animals," Leonard admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "But Brutus, he saved me. Reminded me why I became a vet in the first place." Clara smiled, her eyes bright with understanding. "Sometimes the best healing happens when we stop trying to do it all alone." Brutus lifted his head at that moment, thumping his tail against the floor. The sound echoed through the quiet clinic, a steady rhythm of trust and love rebuilt. Leonard felt the last of his carefully constructed walls crumble as he realized that in trying to protect himself from pain, he'd also shut out the possibility of joy. With Brutus's warm presence at his feet and Clara's hand still in his, Leonard finally allowed himself to feel the full depth of his emotions. Hope, fear, compassion, and love. They flowed through him like a river breaking through a dam, washing away years of collected debris. Thanks for watching. If any part of this story lingered with you, consider subscribing. I'll be here again tomorrow, sharing another tale that speaks to the soul.